can mute themselves. There's a wee icon with a mic at the bottom of your screen, yeah, where you see our slide. I think everybody is fine with that. Just Fred, if you, when you get a chance, if you could mute yourself.
Yeah, I'm just want to ask, where's the chat thing?
The chat box, good question. So the chat box is on the top right corner of the screen of the GoToMeeting, and there's a wee bubble speech icon. Can you see it?
I got it now. Okay,
if you
thanks.
click there, it will open a wee bar and you can keep an eye on the chat. You can chat and send a message just to me or to someone else within the group only, or to everyone. So you have that option, okay? And then you can see also the participants. There's a wee icon with people and it shows there's, well, there was 25 now. David just left us, so there's 24. So obviously as internet connections vary throughout the country, you know, you may find that people will dip in and out, but that's no problem at all. So yes, just to say, we're recording from now. If you have questions, comments, we try to leave them to the end of the, not to the end, but we are going to have a few organizations sharing their practice and what they've been doing so far. So there's two guests that have kindly volunteered to speak. So as they speak, you know, you may have a question that pops into your mind, or a comment, or something you want to share as well. Please do, but maybe take a note of it in your notebook or put it in the chat box, and then we'll address them all after the speakers. And that's simply so the speakers can, you know, don't lose their train of thought and can give you as much information that might be relevant to your project and your organization as well. So yeah, so I just wanted to say who's in the room, so we kind of may know each other or not. So I'm going to read it from our registration list. So some people maybe are different, you know, maybe you've changed with someone in your organization that was due to be here. So I'll just read it from the list of participants, and hopefully that's everybody who's in. And if I've missed anybody, then we'll check that at the end. So who's due to be here today is Abby McSherry from Newry Morning Down CAN Project, Alicia Waters from the Belfast Charitable Society, Chris McCarney from the CAN Project as well, but based in Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council, Colin Graham from RSPB, or maybe someone else from RSPB, David Walsh, who just dropped there, but hopefully he's back with the Ravine Project in Belfast, Fred Hammond with the Flame Gas Works, Genevieve O'Reilly from the Lagan Valley Regional Park, Ellen Connolly from the Ulster Museum, Jacqueline O'Hagan from Eastside Partnership, Conswater Community, let me see, Greenway, and Jenny Ferguson from the National Trust, Keith Beattie from the Loughney Partnership, Lekan Ojo Ojiji Abasi, apologies if I've mispronounced your name, from Counselling All Nations, Lisa Critchley, or mispronounce anybody's name by that matter, Loughney Partnership, Lisa Ray Curry from Belfast Hills, from Eastside Partnership, apologies, Lizzie Pinkerton from Belfast Hills Partnership, Martina O'Neill from the Marble Arch Caves UNESCO site, Maureen McCauley from Glenarm Tourism, you're very welcome, all of you, Rachel Ludlow Williams from Sustrans, Rhonda Dempsey from, well, I just have as an individual, you're very welcome. Shanna Rice from the National Trust in Belfast, Tammy Peake from the National Trust at Mount Stewart, Therese Hamill from Newry Morning Down District Council, and Tina Kirsting from the Quarries Farm in Bangor. Okay, I may have missed one or two of you, and as I said, you may have replaced spots with your colleagues, or you may have different names in your screens from your daughters or sons, or which happens quite often, or your husbands or partners or whatnot, and wives. So apologies if I've missed you, but you can see the participants anyway in that wee icon of people's icon on your top right corner. So before we move on as well, you're all very welcome. Apologies that I didn't ask you to introduce yourselves, but it's just for purpose of time being timely and not going over time, and our time is all precious, and at home it's even more challenging to find quiet time, certainly for me with small children, so appreciate your time here. I just want to give context and background to today's session. This might be your first Vault session, be it online or you may have participated in the previous face-to-face. So our Vault sessions are, the meaning of it is volunteer organizations linking together. And the purpose of these are to bring organizations working in similar fields, areas, industries together that involve volunteers, obviously, because that's Volunteer Now's business in terms of developing, supporting and promoting volunteering. So the idea is to bring you all together in a room or in a virtual room today to look at your practices, how you involve volunteers, any changes, any challenges, any changes. And obviously these sessions now are around very much COVID-19 because it's impacted so much on the way we do business, on our daily lives, on our activities, on things we can no longer do and new things we now have to do. So it's looking at how do you now involve volunteers, because assumingly you involved them before, or maybe you are thinking now I really need to involve volunteers in other areas of my work, and how do you involve them at this present time? What has happened when COVID came? What is happening at this present time, and what's coming ahead? So obviously none of us has clear answers. It's all very uncertain at this time, and we're all trying to figure things out as we go along. But the purpose of today is really just to kind of talk those things through together out loud, brainstorm ideas. Some of you may already have started involving volunteers, so it's to maybe share that and see what's working well, what you wouldn't maybe do again. And then all of us, a lot of us have fears and, things that anxieties and involving people again and in certain roles, and how we do that and how do we keep our volunteers safe, staff safe, everybody happy, and also visitors and guests and whoever your service is targeted at and offered to. So lots of little challenges and questions, but hopefully COVID-19 has given us new opportunities as well. I think it's not all bad, and we should look at it as an opportunity and a challenge to maybe work on things that we needed to work on before, and now we're really forced to, and rethinking roles, rethinking activities, rethinking, groups of people we want to target to volunteer with us, and things like that. So that's what the session is about. We've seen a fantastic uptake from people within our communities across Northern Ireland. We put a call out at the end of March on Volunteer Now. We have a management database that allows you guys to advertise your volunteer opportunities, and then for individuals and groups to have search for opportunities and sign up or express an interest. So we obviously had a number of roles that were ongoing that stopped, so those roles are not going to be advertised for a few months, but new roles and new needs emerge due to COVID-19 as an immediate response to the impact of the pandemic. So we had over 4,000. So we put a call out, an appeal for people to mobilize and offer help, and over 4,000 people did, which is fantastic. And lots of organizations put opportunities. But the truth of the matter is that we had more people wanting to volunteer than we had opportunities for them, which is a fantastic statement to this country and how people are so generous and so thoughtful of others and wanting genuinely to help. So what has happened is that those volunteers now still keep receiving updates and are still interested in doing things. Some of them may have gone back to work, some people may not go back to work so soon. So there is an opportunity there for you if you are developing new roles or you need to involve new volunteers to actually tap into that group of people. And of course, they've put their names forward for helping with COVID-19 emergency response, but now they're potentially looking at further areas of work anyway, and they might be wanting to reskill or retrain. Unfortunately, a lot of people will have been impacted by loss of jobs, and that's a reality that we have to accept and adapt to. And maybe through volunteering, certainly we always see that can help with your career, or give you an idea of a new area you may want to go to. So yeah, keep that in mind, and you can avail of that. I'm just looking at the chat box because there's a comment. Lindsay, can you hear us? Okay, sorry, this is a bit late that I've only seen now your comment for sound. Hopefully you can. I'll just text her. Okay, so that's the background and the context. So hopefully after today you'll feel a wee bit more maybe maybe secure and kind of you have a bit of assurance that other people are at the same stages as you. It's not just you has all these questions and no answers. Volunteer Now doesn't have all the answers either. We're not, although we do very much see ourselves as experts in volunteering, this is also new for us, and we're all trying to figure out you know, the best way to move forward. So I just want to introduce my colleague Lindsey as well. She's the manager for the community projects team and for the events team, and she has lots of experience and many years in the sector. And I just wanted to maybe give you a brief overview of what Volunteer Now does, and in particular the events team, because as I said, we would have worked with heritage in heritage and cultural events that link a bit maybe with some of your projects as well. So Lindsey's sound is coming in and going. Can you unmute yourself, Lindsey, or maybe Jules needs to do that and see if we can hear you? I'm gonna text her. Can you? Sorry, apologies. That mightn't work, so I may need to do her bit. Lindsey, can you hear us? I can see your mic is on.
Hello?
We can. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Or I can hear you.
Hello?
Can everybody else hear okay? Just put
Hello,
your
can you hear
thumbs
me?
up. Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, thumbs up. Everybody can hear you, or most people.
Hello?
Thumbs up if you can hear. Lindsey.
Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Hello. Yes, yes, we can hear you. I'm typing. I'm just gonna type. Sorry, apologies, guy. No, we can hear you. Mightn't work.
Can people hear me?
Yes, Lindsey.
Okay.
Yes, everybody can hear you.
Okay. Apologies, I am having absolute nightmare with technology this morning. I've had to, yep, IT this morning, as is always happens when you need it to work the most. I've had to turn off my camera and screen to see if that will help. So hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, perfect. We can hear you
good.
Really well.
I just feel like I'm talking to myself at the minute because it's a blank screen, but I trust you're all there. So good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining. As Raquel has, I'm sure, said, and apologies, Raquel, I didn't really hear a lot of what was said because my sound is going in and out. I'm sure Raquel has introduced herself this morning and the outline for the session. My name is Lindsey Armstrong. I'm Community Projects Manager at Volunteer Now. And part of my role is working with Raquel in terms of event volunteering. We have been involved in that sort of aspect of volunteering really since World Police and Fire Games back in 2013, when we gathered large numbers of people that wanted to help support those larger scale events across Northern Ireland to ensure that visitors, both far and near, receive that kind of warm, very friendly welcome. And we've been working on that since 2013. Quite a large range of events. So we've worked on things like Tall Ships, the Giro d'Italia, the Grand Fondo, the Irish Open, the likes of Balmoral Show, Belfast Marathon, Lap the Lock, and the biggest event I suppose we've done last year was the Open at Royal Portrush. And that is really, I suppose, those volunteers are there to ensure that people have that warm, friendly welcome, to make sure that they have the best experience they can possibly have, to have time to chat to people, and to ensure that our natural heritage and the environment that we have here in Northern Ireland is displayed to its best, not only the physical environment, but also the people. That we're a friendly country. We support and encourage people to come and visit and experience Northern Ireland at its very best, and really that's what our volunteers are key at doing. And we are looking at that this year because obviously big key events with COVID-19 have been cancelled for the foreseeable future. So we are looking to sort of see what kind of roles we can develop for those event volunteers in the coming months when it is safe to do so. And part of that might be to try to support and encourage the public when we're coming out of lockdown to use those outdoor spaces and public spaces in a responsible way in line with current guidance around COVID-19. So that's sort of a very brief overview of what we're doing within the events team at the moment. But we do have some very highly skilled and trained volunteers that have been involved in a large range of events over the years who are keen to help use their experience within a COVID-19 environment.
Okay, thank you very much, Lindsay. Hopefully everybody could hear that okay. So it's just to give you a wee bit of background as well to one of the projects and activities we do. So without any further ado, I want to welcome our guests that have very kindly volunteered to share what they've been up to so far. And by no means they know more or less than you. They're probably at the same stages as all of you guys, but they just very kindly, you know, I thought their project offered lots of variety in terms of volunteer roles, activities that they offer to the public. And I thought it was a good overall project to maybe look at closer. So they are our guests are going to be Jenny Ferguson from the National Trust and Genevieve O'Reilly from Lagan Valley Regional Park. So we'll start with Jenny and then we'll go to Genevieve, and hopefully they'll try to touch base, you know, different elements of their projects very briefly, and then we'll open the floor, so to speak, for questions. But as I said, as you go along, if there's something that pops in your mind, feel free to put it in the chat box or just take a note on your notepad and then ask once they finish speaking. So let's test Jenny. Can we hear Jenny?
Hi, Raquel.
Hi, Jenny. That's perfect. So are you happy to get started?
Yes, no problem.
We'll just check if everybody can hear you. Thumbs up if you can hear Jenny. I'll just see. Yeah, okay, perfect. I'm just scrolling through everybody in the room. Keep your thumbs up so I can see. There's so many. Sorry, it feels like, yeah, primary school now, everybody. Apologies. Super. I think everybody's okay. If you can't hear, just text us on the chat box and we'll see if we can help. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself, and it's over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. It was actually really nice to see a couple of familiar faces there. People I'm missing quite a lot. So, hello everyone, and it's really nice to actually just be part of this group today and hearing from everyone where you're all at with volunteering at the minute. Goodness, it's been a bit mad, hasn't it? So just to introduce myself, I'm a volunteering and participation consultant for the National Trust in Northern Ireland. So we have an internal consultancy of people who have, I suppose, expertise in particular areas, who will support properties to think about particular areas of work. So my focus is volunteering and participation. So in Northern Ireland we have well, 7 portfolios of places, of properties, and you'll know some of them, like the Giant's Causeway, Mount Stewart, the Argery, Florence Court, Divis Mountain, Murlock Beach. It's really, really varied. It's really quite substantial, the amount of land that we look after in Northern Ireland. I think it's something like 22% of Northern Ireland's coastline, for example, and 46 square miles of countryside, as well as those kind of places that I've just mentioned that maybe you might, you know, be more familiar with, the likes of Mount Stewart and Castle Ward, etc. So my job is to support all of those general managers who look after those places and their teams to think about how we involve others in our work, and actually how are we good partners, how do we support others as well. And the National Trust itself, I'm sure most of you know what the National Trust is, but conservation and access charity. This is meant to be our big 125th celebration year. Not quite the year that we thought it was going to be, but basically we were founded in 1895 really to help people actually who were living in industrial towns and cities in Britain at the time have access to nature. and access to green space. And actually that's just more relevant than ever. And that is actually our core purpose. Our core purpose was not mansion houses. Our core purpose was actually nature. And over time, we've started to look after a broader range of places, but they all have a benefit to bring to people. People relate to cultural heritage, natural heritage in different ways. So it's conservation, but it's also access, and I think that's a really important thing. Normal circumstances, we have about 300 staff, which would double in peak season, and we have around 3,000 volunteers who will support us every year. And I would say about half of those volunteers are in those kind of quite traditional regular volunteer roles, and the rest would be maybe group volunteering one-off, or maybe come for a short period of time on a very defined project. So about 1,500 who support our places in a real range of ways. So in the outdoor roles, we have archaeology volunteers, garden volunteers, rangers, people who have some specialisms in the outdoors like wildlife monitoring. In terms of houses and built heritage, we have visitor welcome volunteers, visitor experience, which is more around the guiding and interpretation, conservation assistants who are looking after our collections, learning volunteers who are working with schools and youth associations. We have volunteers carrying out research. We have volunteers who support us with volunteer admin, and we have a couple of volunteers who will also support us with things like social media. So quite a broad range of roles, and each of those portfolios, each of those kind of groupings of places have a volunteer and community involvement lead, and they've got different job titles, so but a couple of them are on the call. Hello. So we've got volunteering and partnership managers, we've got volunteering coordinators and assistants. They've got different roles depending on their places, what their responsibilities actually are, and their role is to lead for volunteering and involvement in its broadest sense in each place. My role is to support them and to support their places to think all of that through, and look to the future, as well as thinking about what the quality of experience is now. And then they will work with a number of volunteer managers in each place, and those volunteer managers tend to be specialists in other areas. So for example, a gardener will also be a volunteer manager, or a house and collections manager may also be a volunteer manager. So volunteering isn't their specialism, so the volunteer and community involvement lead's role is to really support them to create really good, mutually beneficial experiences. And what I would say just about volunteering is that, we do see it as one form of involvement. It's a really, really important form of involvement. But we try to think about volunteering, participation and inclusion, so they're all wrapped up together and increasingly interdependent. And anyway, just before do you remember the days before COVID-19? I can just about remember them. But we had just signed off on a lovely 10-year plan for volunteering in Northern Ireland, with a big emphasis on positive, flexible and inclusive volunteering, reflecting that our volunteering demographic was not particularly diverse in terms of age, skewing towards an older demographic of volunteers, disability also. And what I would actually say is it's hard to get firm data on this one, but our volunteering certainly would skew more towards the ABC1 socioeconomic backgrounds, but actually that's an area where it is a little bit more representative of our broader communities. But we have often that kind of quite traditional come in once a week model, and we know we already knew that was not going to be the model that was going to take us through into the future. So we already starting to really think about that and the changes that we were maybe going to have to make, while still wanting to keep those volunteers who like that kind of way of working and volunteering involved. So plans to increase accessibility, our engagement in urban areas, and develop our work with young people, and actually the evidence at all as well. Basically, it was going to be amazing. I was very excited. But then COVID-19 came along, and we've had to think again, as we all have had to do, and think about, well, what does this mean for us right now? So I think, first of all, volunteering stopped, and we obviously had to take that safety first approach. Only home-based volunteering could continue. A couple of specialist roles that had always been carried out by volunteers, related mainly to animal welfare, and it's just such a shocking time, really. You know, like, it just was. You know, we talk all the time, the National Trust, about one team, you know, volunteers and staff together. Goodness, we don't always get it right, you know, but it felt alien to us for our volunteers not to be there. And then it got hideously worse, of course, because once it became apparent that you know, the impact of COVID-19 was just going to be so long-standing, and actually our income fell through the floor. You know, we are a charity, and the best thing that we could do to try and protect some of those charitable funds, and we're talking many millions of pounds across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, was to actually furlough a lot of staff. So actually, in the end, 80.1% of our staff were furloughed, and that included a lot of those brilliant volunteer leads. So what's, you know, that's as I say, we'll all have been through this. It's just absolutely, it was gobsmacking and shocking, and so far removed from where we ever thought we would be. And actually, I would say that there was a little period of time we were all just a little bit stunned and trying to kind of get our heads around it. But in my role, which would have been more about supporting the volunteer leads, kind of remotely bringing them together, thinking these things through, I'm giving a lot more sort of hands-on support to the properties in the meantime, and working to get that reopening guidance ready for, you know, for the sites to reopen. And over the last couple of weeks, we have been able to bring back some volunteers and outdoor roles, just small numbers to begin with. So garden volunteers and ranger volunteers. So we've got 5 out of our 7 portfolios who have brought some volunteers back, and the rest are working on it. And we're starting to plan ahead for the gradual return of more roles, trying to make sure that we've got all of our risk assessments and health and safety sorted out around. So that will be more in conservation assistance in the house, and starting now, excuse me, to look at welcome volunteers, and, you know, and it's still going to be a really long time before our guiding volunteers probably in the house are going to come back. And then in the middle of all of this, the National Trust really looked at its income level and really did realise that we are so badly impacted. So this year we stand to lose about £200 million. So a restructure essentially was announced, and I'm talking about that because in terms of volunteering, that has a massive impact. And I think a lot of organisations will be going through similar problems. So when you have a staff restructure, when you're looking to save really, you know, many millions of pounds, so across pay and non-pay, and you're looking at staff redundancies as part of that, I think that relationship between volunteering and staff can enter quite a dangerous place. So that is another, it's really another dimension of what we're looking at the minute. So I'll speed on at just another minute or two just to speak, but basically some of the challenges that we have had along the way have been keeping people informed and reassured, and doing that, you know, volunteers and staff together. So volunteer communication welfare has really been the priority over everything else, you know. So how do we check in with volunteers? Is it through emails, newsletters, phone calls? Initially, we didn't know what the death rates might be. I mean, we were thinking that, you know, that we could lose so many people, and that people that we love would lose family members. And actually, that hasn't been as severe as we thought it was going to be. But that fear at the beginning meant that at the beginning we put a lot of our energies into looking at our pastoral care guidance, making sure that that was right, trying to get the balance and communication and engagement between informing and keeping spirits up, keeping that sense of community going, and yeah, really just that serious focus now on maintaining staff and volunteer relations over a staff restructuring period. we don't want there to be any indication at all of job displacement or substitution, and so that the impact of that means that we've had to make some decisions that we maybe wouldn't have liked to have taken, that volunteers at the minute when they're coming back can only get involved in tasks that they were involved in before, and we're not recruiting new volunteers at the minute, which feels wrong in many ways, because people are connected with nature in ways sometimes that they hadn't before, and volunteering of course is one way that they can remain connected, but we've got to prioritise our current staff and volunteers, and then we have that realisation that remote volunteer engagement is going to have to last over a very long period of time, you know. And if I think about our built heritage in particular, it's going to be several months, and we know that not everyone's going to come back, but we're not, and when they do come back, they're not going to be coming back to what they came to before. So we're really having to think about how we engage our volunteers through that and make sure that their voices are heard. Another big challenge has been that we feel like we're making decisions for volunteers. We don't like doing this, you know. So at the minute, at a time when people have really had their choices removed in life, they're you know, that idea that actually people over the age of 70 are more vulnerable. At the minute, our position is that they should remain at home and not volunteer, although we're looking at that and we're trying to move towards being able to do that more on an individual risk assessed basis. Really interested to hear what other people have to say about that, actually. Also things like volunteers at the minute that are coming back are not involved in visitor facing tasks. That will probably be changing soon. We just think needed a period of time just to kind of work out what we needed to do. Also thinking about, you know, we have a number of volunteers with learning disabilities, and for those who can volunteer independently, we're just trying to work out how we can do that well and safely for them. Again, we're making decisions that impact on staff on furlough, which when normally we're really collaborative. That's hard too, but I think one of the biggest things for me is just getting mutual benefit back into volunteering. It's all felt quite operational, directional and capacity driven, you know, just in terms of the whole organisation. It's about the essential tasks, you know, what do we need to do to stay open, and that has been the right thing to do at the beginning. Safety first, keep, you know, and keeping our places going, but now we need to get the mutual benefit back into volunteering and all those lovely reasons why people come to volunteer with us, you know, for people who've been through hard times, or you know, want the solace of connecting with nature, people who love the social aspect of it, people who are thinking about employability, need to get all of that back into it, and that's what we're thinking a lot. So again, still not in that space so much where we're thinking about the new opportunities, but trying to get it right for our current volunteers, and of course trying to keep them safe as they return. So our health, we've developed training for them, we're making sure our briefings are good, social distancing, strict health and safety guidelines, being all over the detail in ways that maybe we wouldn't have been just quite to that extent before. But we are also looking to the future as well and really trying to think about inclusion and accessibility. And, you know, we say everyone's welcome. Do we really mean it? And how can we live those values right now? And we know that we'll need to work much more in partnership with others, you know, for shared outcomes to be able to do that. We definitely can't ignore the challenges of our volunteer demographic. And I think that when we think about the built heritage in particular, you know, we're starting to plan now for much more sort of flexible ways in which volunteering can happen indoors, and of course that massive opportunity to help people connect with nature and the outdoors, and we're really keen to get back to that, being able to do that, and we want to do it soon in a timely way, but going through that restructuring period as well is also really impacting on that. So it's tough, but I think one of these things that I think this is all highlighted to the organisation, just how much volunteers are, you know, not just like a nice add-on, they are a massive part of our organisation. We don't function well without them, not just in terms of you know, the jobs that we do, but just in terms of who we are and how we get on with things. And we just want to get to the place as quickly as we can where as many of them are as back as can be, who want to be back, and just knowing but that it's going to be a different situation they're coming to. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Jenny. There's been just a wee question from Nicola Fitzsimons. She says, great overview so far of your journey during this difficult time, Jenny, thank you. You mentioned about a 10-year plan for volunteering. So Nicola is wondering if this is an internal document or is it shareable? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Jenny, unmute yourself again. Yeah.
Sorry. I would say that is, I'm sort of happy, you know, separately to talk some of it through, but it was something that we were just getting ready to share, but it's going to have to change, you know, as a result of COVID-19. So it's not obsolete, but it needs to alter. So it's not something that I can, but I'm happy to talk it through with anyone, you know, who's interested in that. Happy to get their perspective on it as well.
Yeah, of course.
How we can improve it.
No problem. And then Abby just put a wee question as well. Jenny, would be great to see if any templates, for briefing risk assessments for working with volunteers. We actually have some of these on our website as well. So Volunteer now has a number of free resources. So I'll direct you to these after the session, but you can search them as well. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Jenny? Or
no, I would just say I'm happy to actually, if people want to have a conversation offline, you know, about any of this, and you know, I'm happy to. There's some things we can share and some things we can't, but I'm happy to share my email address if anybody wants to get in touch, you know, and we can, yes, of course, you know, whatever we can do together.
No problem, thank you. So yes, the more general questions we'll leave towards the end. Helen Connolly also put a question, but it's a fairly general one. So I'll get Genevieve to share a wee bit about their project and their volunteer roles and what stage they're at, and then we'll look at these. Now, we're coming tight with time, so I'll pass the floor to Genevieve. Jenny, if you just mute yourself for now, if you don't mind, and then Genevieve, you're on, so I'll just let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the project and yourself and the roles you involve volunteers in. Okay, Genevieve, thank you. We can't hear you. Can you speak? Let's see. I can see you're here. Genevieve, can you hear me? I'm going to text you. Can you? Maybe there's an issue with your mic, I wonder. Apologies, guys. There's always something that happens. You can hear me, but we cannot hear you, although your mic isn't muted, so we should be able to hear you. Are you using the computer mic or a set of headphones? No, yeah, we can't hear you. Can anybody hear Genevieve, or is it just me? No, I see heads nodding as in no. So what I'll do is, Genevieve, if you try to play about with your mic and see, will we be able to hear at some point? Just keep trying. And what we will do is maybe get people to, we'll swap the order and get people to maybe share a bit about what they're doing or similar things to Jenny and the roles within the National Trust, or entirely different things. So yeah, I think Jenny mentioned quite a number of challenges there, but also new opportunities. And obviously, as they said, their 10-year lovely plan is now going to be not entirely scrapped, obviously, but it's going to have to be reworked at in the light of a new world that we all live in. So is there anything that people would like to share or ask at this point until hopefully Genevieve can join us? So if you want to speak, just unmute yourself or give us a shout on the chat box, and then yeah.
Hello.
Who's that? Is this Genevieve?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now. Can everybody hear
Yes,
Genevieve? Thumbs up.
Thank goodness
yeah,
for that.
Okay.
There's
no problem.
Some technical hitch. Apologies for
worries.
having to have a photograph up. My camera won't work on this laptop either. I'm working on quite an old laptop, but I can see most of you anyway. So good morning to you all. It is a very interesting time we find ourselves in at the minute. I am from Lagan Valley Regional Park, and I'm the volunteer and visitor officer there. So we are obviously a much smaller organisation than Jenny is coming from. We have 5 staff members, but we have around 60 volunteers across 4 volunteer roles. So at the minute, all our roles were cancelled, suspended about a week before the official lockdown, partially due to the fact that a lot of our volunteers fall into that vulnerable demographic as well. We have an awful lot of volunteers that are over 70. I'll run through quickly our 4 roles because they are quite broad. We would have conservation volunteers who would be out in groups in the outdoors, so that's one role. We would have then visitor guides, heritage guides who are in the Lockkeeper's Cottage and the Industry Barge, which are also very small settings, small visitor centres, so that was a major concern from the very outset, even before the initial lockdown came in, so we actually stopped them around St Patrick's Day. And then we have some wildlife surveyors out doing the likes of bumblebee, butterfly surveys, bat surveys, things like that, occasionally as the seasons progress, so they wouldn't be out all the time. And we have a couple of volunteer rangers. So before lockdown, we would have had about 25 heritage guides, sort of 25 to 30 groups that came and went with the conservation work. We would have had maybe 10 to 15 people out of groups, 12 wildlife surveyors and 2 volunteer rangers. So just looking at our demographics, even for moving forward, minus the safety concerns that we would have and that we're having to consider as we go forward, we're looking at the possibility of probably at least 50% of our volunteers across all roles being in the vulnerable category. And when it comes to the heritage guides, we would go from having 25 potentially down to 4. Now, I would be thinking along the same lines as Jenny, and that this 70-year-old vulnerability, there is the questions to be asked. You don't want to exclude people unnecessarily because it has been very difficult times for everybody, and you do want to be able to include people and engage volunteers where you can, but obviously safety is the biggest concern. So that's one of our initial decisions to be made as well moving forward, and it will also go in line with obviously government guidance changes down the line as well. One of the things I was having difficulty getting my head around as well is even just like where volunteering sits within the sort of 5 stages of the executive plans, because you know there's sort of guidance for employees, there's guidance for the general public for their leisure time and things, but it's sort of identifying where does volunteering fit into that as well, so you know that you're doing the right thing, both for public health, for your volunteers, and for the organisation as well. So that would be a big question that I've sort of had knocking about in the back of my head as things go on. I'd be interested to know other people's thoughts on that one too. We still have everything suspended at the minute. I think one of our biggest challenges will be the Lockkeeper's Cottage and Barge, which we manage through our volunteering programme on behalf of the owners, which is Belfast City Council. So there'll be a lot of discussions with partners over a lot of our volunteering as well, because we're not landowners on any of the sites we work on. We're working in partnership with a couple of councils, with the Department for Infrastructure, sometimes with the National Trust at Minneburn. So there'll be a lot of discussions between partners to around risk assessments and things like that too. But yeah, massive challenges ahead. Obviously the outdoor roles will return much sooner than any indoor ones, but I'm very interested to know the likes of I know there's someone here from the National Museums today as well who's probably will be having thoughts about the folk museum, and you know, when you've got like small cottages and you have a volunteer and you're going to have visitors, about how you deal with things in such small spaces. So these are all things that we're having to think about, and I'm sure there's many of you there in the same situation. So I'll keep that fairly brief because I know we're quite pushed for time, and we obviously want to leave room for everybody to have a bit of a discussion around things as well. So I'll pass back over to Raquel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Genevieve. So hopefully that was useful. It is just an overview of where people are at, and Genevieve already posed quite a few interesting questions, and it would be good to hear from everybody or whoever is willing to maybe pitch in. So this is my first time doing a vault session, so I'm not sure how to give you all a little bit of room to chat if you wish to do so. Obviously you can just listen. So there's a question coming through from Fred from the Flame Gasworks. Have you considered self-guided routes for the lock house and lighter, and perhaps even pre-booking? So that's obviously to Genevieve. Is this something you guys have been thinking about?
We're still, it's probably a long way down the line before those properties will be open. So we're sort of just discussing all possibilities. They're very small sites. The cottage as well, there's a very busy cafe right next to us there as well. So he's actually just due to open again, I think today. So we'll need to see social distancing things as well, how that's all progressing. But any indoor sites are going to be much further down the line at this point. So we're still in very early days of considerations there. There's been talk about could we put screens in. We will, as I say, we're probably going to have a lot less volunteers than we would have had previously. We probably would actually need additional help for opening, because we would need to, much the way shops and anywhere are doing at the minute, you would need to have somebody outside managing visitors going in, so as you were controlling numbers. So those sites will be one of our biggest challenges, I would say, moving forward.
And then Lisa has put a question forward as well. I was wondering about the 6-person rule outdoors with social distancing. Could this count for outdoor conservation volunteering, 5 volunteers and 1 team leader? For example, with tasks that would have very low risk, for example, not cutting trees down. Yes, it's my understanding that the 6-person rule applies to any groups of people. And Jenny and I had this conversation before the session today, that that would be the way that they would be able to start involving conservation volunteers or wildlife surveyors, be it that the wildlife surveyors a lot of times work by themselves anyway, but it would be in those groups of 6. The only challenge is it 6 that can it be 6 from different groups, or is it a group of 6 people that already know each other? But yeah, because of that rule now around households, so that is a tricky question for the moment. I think this is all changing so rapidly that we just have to keep an eye on rules and regulations. Does anybody want to pitch in on that, or Jenny, what were you thinking of starting with those roles maybe?
So in terms of the 6-person rule, that's certainly it really depends, is the way that we're looking at it. So some of our sites, you're talking about like 900 acres. So if 3 volunteers are in together and spread out across that acreage, they're not actually working closely together. So a lot of it depends on just the actual site and the place where they're going to be working. But we've definitely, in terms of trying to take a task-based approach to it more than anything else. So tasks that don't involve close contact are the tasks that can continue. And that then, so if we were looking to plan tasks that required 6 people to be working quite closely together, we would be worried about that anyway. I think is the best way to put it, and trying to restrict the amount of tasks that require people to work in close proximity.
Yeah, I think that is right. Fred from the Flame Gasworks had just mentioned that step 3 is what he thinks will be for indoor attractions to reopen. So in theory, that will include, your cottages and your barges and your houses, heritage homes. Then there's a question from Therese. Amal from Ring of Gullion, is there any guidance around risk assessment or guidelines for working with conservation volunteers and biodiversity surveyors in particular? Would people want to share what they're doing or what stage they're at in terms of risk assessing the roles and how they're taking an approach of involving volunteers slowly? Does anybody want to pitch in something around, yes, that query of conservation and biodiversity surveyors? No.
Well, I'm here with the Belfast Hills Partnership. I actually just met virtually with my volunteers earlier on this morning to chat to them about going forward and what all systems we put in place. So our plan is to start very slowly from next week with just 5 volunteers coming onto site. And we're going to start at a tree nursery, which is just at our offices, and it's quite a big area, so it's very, very easy to spread everyone out. But we were just sort of talking in terms of gloves and tools and cups of tea and all the normal things and how we're going to work things. But a lot of very positive feedback from the volunteers about getting back and how to do things now.
There is a few documents that I have come across. I don't know if they're Lizzie, sorry, would you mind muting just for 1 second, because I can hear the feedback, and then you can come back in if you want to add. There's a few documents I've come across that may help, and some of you may already know about them. Obviously, within Volunteer Now, we have a whole section in terms of documents and templates to support volunteering during COVID-19, and some of them are risk assessment templates, but also there's a document on how to keep volunteers safe from the point of view of an organization, and also how to keep yourself safe if you're a volunteer, because obviously there's been a lot of informal volunteering happening as well, you know, helping neighbors and things like that. So we just wanted to make sure people were doing it for the right in the right way and keeping everybody safe. So that's there, and have a look at it. Then there is a few documents that I have come across that may be useful. And of course now my document is not open, so just give me a wee second. But it's basically from organizations that would link in with the outdoor and recreation. So I think one of them is the Outdoor Recreation Network. They've recently published, this document isn't opening for me, but anyway, I remember it. Have recently published a document on reopening public green spaces, and there's guidance around staff and volunteers in terms of getting them back to the activities, equipment, training, you know, what should you be looking at. There was another document I had seen that was useful. I can't remember now, I'll come back to it. Then I'll continue here just with the questions. Maureen would like to ask Fred and Genevieve particularly if they feel there is need to consult with or sound out community regarding their acceptance of visitors. So is there a need to consult or sound out community regarding their acceptance of visitors? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Maureen. Do you want to come on and put that question forward?
I've just replied, by the way, on the chat.
Okay, no problem. Is this Fred?
Yep.
Okay.
Now you can speak. I would just be concerned that community might not accept visitors. You know, we have an aged community, and you know they are hesitant and anxious, and I just wonder, you know, as a volunteer organisation, how responsive we should be to the community feelings. I mean, we're in a position where we would be meeting possibly, well, international visitors where they still, you know, exist in Ireland, and we believe they do, because we were having them in right up until, you know, 17th, 18th of March when we finally closed. There were some long stay visitors who were going to be moving around within Ireland. So, you know, is there an onus on volunteer organisations to sort of put their own community first, as it were, in terms of safety and protection and whatever else, you know?
Yeah, I have something that I can say to that, but does Fred or Genevieve want to pitch in on that first? Fred had answered. We haven't consulted specifically with locals, but are liaising with and EA. I'm not sure what the acronyms for. Our numbers are fairly low. Yeah, do you want to say something?
Midland stand from Borough Council.
Okay.
Yes, and that would be the same council that we have in Glenarm. So I'd be interested in the response.
Well, our thinking at the moment is that because we have low numbers in any case, and we're not going to have groups this year, we're just going to have individuals or family groups or whatever. If we had a pre-booking system, we could keep a handle on when they come. There's also on-street parking. It's a public road beside us, and we also have our own private car park, so there shouldn't really be an issue on that. The concern would be more the safety of the guides and the safety of the visitors, and we're thinking along the lines of basically a self-guided tour around the site whenever people come in at known times. Yeah. And then procedures for when they leave. So we don't really see a big impact. Of course, bear in mind there's also the economic and negative impact if we don't keep people coming.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're all suffering financially, but we're always on a shoestring. The other thing, and nobody touched on it today, public toilets. We happen to be along the coast road, the Causeway coastal route. We're very popular. We have disabled facility toilets, and we're very popular with visitors. They just presume there will be open toilets at a visitor centre, and they were open and free. Now we are going to have to rethink that situation. Any guidance from anybody on how one might handle that situation?
You have public toilets, do you?
No, we have. They are private toilets, but we have made them available to visitors.
Yeah.
On a basis.
This is Jenny from the National Trust. Tammy Peake is on the call, and Tammy works on an operational level at Mount Stewart, and they do have their toilets open. So Tammy might be able to. She's going to kill me now, but she might say something about that. But I would also just say that we've had to operate a pre-book system for people coming in now. Obviously, our numbers are quite big, so we're working on a basis of, at the minute, we've only just started this week bringing people back. In fact, just yesterday, but it's literally we're capping our numbers at 30% of the people who would normally come, and we'll see how we go with that. So people have to pre-book even just to park their car. But I'll let Tammy talk about the loos. Thanks, Tammy. She's not going to talk about the toilets now.
Come in, Tammy.
Sorry, while she's getting ready, how do you do the pre-booking? Do you have an online facility in your website, or do you do it through Facebook, or what?
We're using Eventbrite. It's not perfect. It really isn't perfect. But we're having to kind of work on the kind of 80-20 rule. Normally in the National Trust we try to get everything right all the time. Obviously we never do to get everything right, but we try really hard to perfect things. Take too long, and we're trying to just, if we can get things right 80% of the time, that's what we're trying to work on basis. So that was the best way that was the best system for us to be able to use to get people through.
Do you have a link then in your website somewhere to?
Yes, yeah, and all of our social media is very much around saying, yes, some of our places are open again, but actually stay local, don't be traveling. We're trying to persuade people to stay in their own places, because we really understand the impact on community, and we're trying to keep those numbers low. But Tammy's just messaging here saying that her sound isn't working. That's convenient, Tammy. But she's saying, just having a look to see what she's saying about that. Anything about that? No. Basically, I think the way that so toilets sanitized 3 times a day, that we have an enhanced hygiene instruction. But she's saying yesterday and that first day of opening it was manageable. But that's maybe a different situation that you're in if they're not. If you don't know, if you don't normally have to provide toilets, I think it's a really funny one. I don't mean funny, haha. Difficult to actually get the right balance here, because obviously from an accessibility perspective we want to provide toilets for people, but we don't want to encourage people to travel far either. So it is difficult.
Is there guidance on the sanitizing, the requirements to sanitize? Is there some kind of, when she says sanitizing 3 times per day as per enhanced hygiene instruction, where is that instruction?
That's internal. That's an internal hygiene instruction, but that has come from all the the guidance on NI Direct and also in the English and Welsh government for workplace. So there isn't much around volunteering, but we're working on the basis of workplace guidance basically, to make sure that we're trying to put the right things in for volunteers and visitors.
Yes,
Okay.
Maureen, what Jenny said is true, as in the guidance comes from government guidelines and public health agency, and you can find most of these, and they're constantly being updated in nidirect.gov.uk. Obviously looking at Northern Ireland specifically, don't be looking at UK-wide documents because it will be slightly different. So it's all there. Now there are standards for service professionals and standards for the service industry and visitor industry as well. And those will include hygiene and safety, in terms of staff. Well, it won't say volunteers, but volunteers are sitting within staff, and then visitors. There's also you were mentioning, consulting with community. Of course you can consult, but I think a lot of the community's fears are your own fears, as in when you go to a restaurant now or when you go anywhere public. We all have the same maybe anxieties, or similar at least. But there is a program that I can encourage you maybe to take part in, which is called the World Host. It is a World Host program, and they've produced a program just for 2020, which is obviously responding to the challenges of COVID-19. It's offered to people first. We Volunteer Now are the organization that can offer it to volunteer involving organizations. Then obviously there's trainers that would work just with private and commercial companies, rather, the hotels and within the hospitality and tourism industry. We would just be able to offer that training to volunteers. It costs £5. It's an e-learning module. £5 per person, so it's very, very affordable. It's really to reach everybody. It's an e-learning model that takes 60 minutes for the participant to complete. 90 minutes at their own leisure. And you can basically, if you're interested, you can ask us for more information, or I can follow up after the session with more information. And it is a worldwide recognized standard for service professionals. It looks at service, customer service skills, but then within this environment of COVID-19. So how to build customer confidence again, and how to ensure that you have all the health and safety in place and good hygiene overall. And it looks at even doing payments, contactless payments, and sharing equipment and things like that. So it's very useful, and it is ready to go. It's going to launch next Monday, the 8th of June, and you are welcome to then train your staff and or volunteers to it. So you at least have a standard. You receive a certificate once you complete it, and then the people first can issue a plaque or like to the highest levels. Sharing the guidance is on outdoor recreation, and some of the documents I've seen, which I can share after today's session. There is guidance on, obviously, the most obvious answer to that is try to minimize sharing of tools. If people can use one item per person, be it their own or some items that you provide. But if things need to be shared, is constant cleaning and raising awareness of personal responsibility as well, and hand hygiene, obviously offering the hand sanitizers there, washing basin facilities. It's just putting it's doing everything you can, but also putting not the onus, but encouraging each individual to be responsible within their own actions as well. So that's the guidance really so far, and obviously using maybe masks if they are in closer proximity, so that if they, you know, there's no spread of infection going into the items and into other people. Is there any? I'm conscious of time. We're run past the time, so if people have to leave and have other commitments, feel free. Is there anything that people would want to add or ask? My colleague Jules or Sandra can follow up after this with a few links and things we've discussed today. And yourself as individuals, if there's things you would like to share with the group that you didn't today, please do so. We are saving the chat box, so I'll have a look better at that, and if there's any answers that came out, we can share with you all after the session finishes as well. So if there's anything else people want to add.
Can I just, sorry, because I know we've gone on a bit, but I'm really keen to understand the breadth of organisations who might be bringing back over 70s who are fitting well and not shielding. Yeah. If that's something that people are doing or not doing at the minute, because we're right in the process of making that decision and it's a difficult one.
I'd echo that. Actually, I'd be interested to know what people are doing on that, because at the minute we'd be very much erring on the side of caution as well.
Has anyone brought back volunteers over 70?
I put something through to Jenny there, but happy to talk about it. So the RSPB are going along the lines that we are happy to bring people back who are over 70. We think it's just a false barrier. 70-year-olds, as long as they're not what we're clinically extremely vulnerable, therefore shielding, as long as they're fit, able, and we are able to offer them safe, socially distanced volunteering, then over 70s, no problem at all as far as RSPB is concerned.
And is that just a conversation then, just with the individual? Although we can pick up about this separately. But yeah. Yeah,
I mean, we leave it up to them. If they're happy to come back. I mean, obviously not everybody's happy to come back anyway. A lot of people are nervous. We did a poll on our volunteers, and very high scores on wanting to come back, but not far behind it came nervousness about coming back. So I think every individual volunteer has different feelings, and it is those individual conversations that need to be had with everybody before they come back. But communications is key.
And Raquel, from a volunteer now perspective, what's your view on it?
Yeah, I think it is a personal conversation and risk assessment per individual that you could and should be having. It is a tricky one. Obviously, the guidance is now changing, as in over 70s can, come out of the house and do different activities, respecting social distancing and keeping themselves and others safe. So I think it is, as you say, it's being a bit more flexible in the approach. I don't, as guidance progresses, it doesn't make sense to have this blanket approach just to make potentially an organization's life easier, which at the end of the day, it won't be, because you may need those volunteers, and a lot of organizations, the core or more reliable or more regular volunteers are in that age bracket. So I think it is a personal conversation and risk assessing. You may need to delve a wee bit deeper into medical conditions or health, that things that you need to be aware that maybe you didn't need to be aware before. So how to ask that sensitively, but it is very much on a one-to-one cases, I think, basis. But as the guidance changes, there's no reason why a person who's over 70, who's fit and healthy and has no risk conditions, medical health conditions, and feels able to do the role, and you provide the most safe environment to them and the right equipment and the social distancing is adhered to, I don't see why they couldn't volunteer.
We've actually got a form that all volunteer line managers and staff line managers should be using when they're bringing back furloughed staff and bringing back volunteers as well. So, it's all set out there. I'll probably share that with people if they're interested in it.
Thank you, Colin. So yeah, if there's anything you would like to share, happy to share after today, just feed into ourselves. I think you've all received an email both from Julianne or Sandra Faulkner, so you can refer things back to them if that's easier, and then they'll compile that, and we'll share an email after today. So if there's nothing more pressing that someone wants to raise, is there any final thing that people want to raise as a question or give share information, because I'm conscious that we should be wrapping up soon. Anything else, or are we happy enough to wrap up? And I'll do a follow-up email from this session, and then obviously you're welcome to connect with each other as well on your own time. Happy enough? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully that was useful. You know, it got some answers, or maybe thinking of areas that you hadn't thought of before. We are all dealing with this, you know, and the good thing is that we're all at the same situation, the same point, all dealing with these challenges and these anxieties. But I think we can come out the other end, you know, with better solutions actually, and better ways of doing things. Certainly recruitment, training volunteers is going to change massively now with the social distancing. So even just that is a piece of work in itself. Not to mention obviously opening activities and resuming activities to guarantee social, you know, to guarantee income into your organization. So hopefully that was useful. Thank you very much, and we'll catch up with you all soon. Okay, have a great day, and we'll see you soon. All the best.
She's good, Raquel. She's actually good. Your women get to, so that then just leave. Really? Yeah. So some people left early for the questions.
Yeah. What I'm thinking,